Hey everyone, I'm Adam Harry from BoLS Souls with
Michael with Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
and we've got Wrath and Glory. Michael, you brought Wrath and Glory. What is Wrath and Glory?
Well, I think you know.
I
Because
do-
I remember
I do know.
you guys got a chance to play.
We did.
With Ross, I believe, one of the designers a while back.
Yes, Rob Thompson, yes. Rob
But
Thompson,
I
yes.
believe it's available pretty much everywhere now.
It is
We've got our
now-
copies. It's
yes.
out in the wild. So I brought the core rulebook so we can take another look at it, and the GM screen so we can take a look at all the secrets and fun things hiding in there.
Yeah, I love this game.
Yeah.
It's a really good RPG system.
It's a good toolbox for a lot of different types of 40k games compared
Bingo.
to old editions where it's very split up and very specific.
Yep.
So
You can run a Space Marine with Guardsmen and it doesn't feel like somebody's contributing more than the other. It's literally...
it's good for like
it's
mixed
good.
kind of games like Rogue Trader, and you can play Chaos and
can do a lot
couple
of
different
fun
Xenos races too. So
Oh, yeah. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, Michael. Wrath and Glory. We've got the GM screen. We've got the core rules. Let's start with the GM screen.
I want to focus on one thing real quick: the incredible art on the covers of these.
Good point.
You don't often get to see a lot of art that's like 40k related that's really clean and really nicely done, but also gives you a really good sense of the characters, like the size between this commissar and this imperial fist.
You know, you say that, and
it's different.
I just was thinking back. You don't typically see a commissar next to a Space Marine.
Yeah, well, they don't interact all that much, you know.
Or admech.
Really, technically speaking, in the
priest.
lore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have what looks like, I guess, you're another tech priest. He's got one of the exterminatus devices from like the 40k like objectives kit.
Right.
Same design right there with the ticker and the huge spherical bomb.
And you
got
got
a
a
Raven
scout
Guard
for-
scout.
yeah.
Yeah. So looks pretty great. Let's start with the GM screen, like you said, just because
Yeah.
the book's gonna take longer. So it comes in your nice little
Little sleeve.
there. And again, let's focus on the art really quick, just because I want to see. It's only 3 panels, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't like huge, like 6-panel GM screens.
But look at that. You see the
Same cover art,
sisters.
Sister and Tempestus Scion. We
Yeah.
can scooch a little if we need to.
Yeah, Sister Tempest.
And then I really like this one here.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a
Inquisitor
really clean
next
with
to a White
nice
Scar.
work background.
Yeah.
So you've got a mix of different backgrounds, mix of different characters. It really reflects in the game your different characters you can make, your different theaters of war you can engage in.
Yeah, really good art. They did a great job.
Very good style.
And then on the inside, you've got
A lot of
just
tables.
a whole lot of tables.
So we can do this one at a time if we want, just sort of...
We're probably not going to go through each one, but you get the idea.
You get the idea, basically. It gives you all your resource allocations and spending, like ruin, uses for your dice, actions, and your difficulties.
Yeah.
I like the scattering diagram, which is really helpful for very
yeah.
specific things, but it's there if you need it.
Yep.
Flip over here, check the middle.
Encounter.
You get mostly
all that
encounter
stuff.
rules. I like the step-by-step breakdown of the encounter for people, because a lot of people forget, like, oh, I didn't, determine if you guys are getting ambushed. Oh, I forgot to, do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
You got your tier rules, different reactions, and difficulty
A little
modifiers.
quick reference. I love that. I love that. It's just very. It's a very practical
Yep.
DM.
No wasted space. No useless. Anything on the inside.
All the art's on the other side. All the stuff you want to know is on the inside.
Your list of combat options is especially helpful because there's a pretty sizable number, and every different character is going to want to do different things.
Yes.
So it's good to know, what are you going to do? Are you charging, or are you just moving? Are you
Bracing,
firing a
aiming,
multi-shot or a salvo? What are you doing here?
Suppressing fire.
Yeah.
And
And then specific effects of things that
yeah.
happen to them. So, if you're bleeding, this is what happens. Really quick reference, quick glance, reminder of the rules, so you don't have to remember the entire book.
But just a side note though, if you ever do need to check rules, they also have the page numbers listed, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
That'll reference you back.
Just in case
to...
this isn't enough, where you're thinking, well, grapple, opposed strength test, great, easy. But then called shot, okay, easy. And then all out attack, great. But let's go to page 220 just to find out specific effects of these specific
You can tell those
actions.
pages to the players if they have their own book too, so they can.
Yeah, which is really helpful, because then your players know where to find it in the future.
Right. And speaking of books,
Let's take a look at it. It's a pretty big sizable book. Let's just show
It
this
is
here.
hefty.
It's a pretty thick book, page count wise. It's at some more stuff. 452 if you include the index. So pretty sizable book right there.
yes.
So let's
yes,
flip
sir.
over. As you may have seen on one of the pages, there is a starter set, which is a good sort of intro product. But if you are comfortable with skipping that, this is where you're going to want to start with the core rules.
Here's a quick look at the table of contents. As you can see, it is a dense book. This book is kind of Spartan in the way that it's gets right to the point.
Yeah, there's
A lot of
the graphic design of the book is it's clean, it's well laid out, and like I said, there's not a lot of wasted space. They get their rules to you, and there's enough rules and different things that they need as much space as they can.
Yeah.
So a lot of people might say, oh, this book doesn't look good. Oh, it's not as pretty as it could be. But ultimately, if you have as many rules as 40K kind of needs,
right? And it's not that there's not art, because that's not what
this
it's saying.
Is a great picture of Cadians right here.
But it's just that there's a lot that they're communicating. And by the way,
useful maps for everybody who might need them.
By the way, this does take place post Cicatrix Maledictum. So
yeah. It's in the Dark Imperium,
is in the current timeline of 40K.
in whatever your interpretation of the current 40K is. Yeah. I want to flip actually back to the table of contents. I want to show you my personal favorite chapter right here, The Lure of the Infernal. So we're going to have to get to that. But
that's a psychic power. We'll come back to that. We'll by the way, this game it definitely feels like, if you've played RPGs before, this one will feel similar to you. It's not like a completely different...
it's a dice pool D6 system, but it's very reminiscent of something like maybe Tales from the Loop, or like the Vampire Storyteller system in a way.
It feels like a cool
It's not like
merging.
a D20 system, but it's a similar kind of style.
It feels like a cool merging of say like 5th edition D&D with some of those other styles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's done in a really cool way. I mean, we picked it up, we played on the stream with Ross, like we mentioned earlier. We picked it up that day. It wasn't even like...
Yeah, it's not especially hard.
No. It's a really clean system.
And like I said, it reminds me a lot of the Storyteller system for Vampire or Werewolf, with dice pool and rolling number of successes based off of the numbers. So if you've played those, you'll jump into this pretty easy. I also want to shout out this here, Blood of the Covenant, this little short story at the beginning by Aaron Dembski Bowden, one of my personal favorite library writers.
Yeah.
Has done some of my favorite books, Night Lords Trilogy.
There you go.
Thanks, Aaron, if you're watching. But we've got this nice story for all these different little bits and pieces. And then you got a foreword here by Phil Kelly, of course.
That's right.
And then you've got your intro into the actual book here.
And again, it gets into the whole detail, talks about the Horus Heresy.
All about the world, all about where everybody's at, who the gods of chaos are, Eldari,
breaks down all that stuff, the background, all the stuff you're going to want to know.
Tyranids, that's yours.
That's what I'm talking about.
Did you know? Well, hold on, I don't know if you know. Did you know that they represent a unique threat to the Imperium?
I do.
Oh, okay, good.
I did.
Just make sure. There might be somebody who doesn't. So.
Probably not going to be a Tyranid campaign in the long run.
Probably not going to be able to play as a Tyranid.
As a Gene Stealer. I know. I asked Ross, like, hey, can we play? And he's like,
maybe you could play as a Gene Stealer cult.
Maybe as a cultist, but like, you can't play a Gaunt. You just say nom the whole time, and like it's really hard to communicate.
There's my boys right there.
Fenris right there.
Yeah, stuck in the middle of the worst warp storm in the world.
That's where
in the universe.
Pups.
That's where they belong. Okay. All right, so we got some more background on the Dark Imperium, specifically
it takes place in the current timeline.
Now, the Gilead system here is sort of their setting almost.
Yeah, it's their home
it's like
campaign.
their basic setting for the game. Of course, with the 40K universe being as big
massive.
as it is, you can play anywhere. It doesn't really matter. But if you want a place that's already had some work done for you, it's like playing Forgotten Realms for D&D.
Exactly.
Work's already done for you.
The world building's done for you.
So there's that, and then we get into some rules.
Yeah.
So of course your core rules, your basic stuff, breaks down your dice mechanics. Like I said, it's a pool system.
Yeah.
You're gonna collect D6s, roll them. You're trying to get typically 4s or greater.
Yep.
Those
6s are better.
6s are better. 4s and 5s are what they call icons, I believe. It counts as 1 success. 6s is exalted icons, which are 2 successes. Yeah. That's basically
and you can actually bank some of that stuff. And we won't get into how to play per se, but it's a pretty easy system.
That's the most basic rule, is roll a bunch of dice and try and get 4s or greater. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. You're trying to get a number of successes, but that depends on what you're doing. So we can keep flipping through here. Yep. Of course, you have all your different rules like difficulty numbers,
core mechanic
your different bonuses and penalties. Yep. So a lot of different stuff you can do with shifting your results and
because like weapon damage and stuff like that is calculated based on your success. And
most weapon damage is sort of fixed in a range, which makes sense sort of for 40K, where it's like lasguns kind of do the same amount of damage every time if you hit with it.
But it depending on how well you hit or how well you aim, you can shift some of those successes over to the damage side of the house and try to do extra damage. You won't do like crazy damage with a lasgun, but you can do
reliable damage and get a little better if you aim well.
Right.
One of my favorite.
Some of the more damaging weapons just have a much bigger damage. So.
One of my favorite things they have is this axiom of like failing forward, which is sort of the core tenet of the game, which is if you fail at a test, the GM's not going to bring the whole campaign to a screeching halt. You know, the Gene Stealer cult gets away, the Tyranids take over the planet, and the Black Legion destroys your homeworld. They might.
What are you, Katie?
But this fail forward concept is if you fail something, you're still going to keep playing. The story is going to advance, but you might succeed with a cost or fail with a benefit. It's a little bit reminiscent of the Star Wars RPG in that way,
definitely.
Where the dice actually reflect that in Star Wars, whereas in this instead it's the sort of results of the test. So
failure should be an interesting consequence and not a grinding halt.
Not completely ruin your story. story complete entirely. So, character creation is obviously one of those fun parts of any RPG. And the fun part about this is that you have what are called tiers. Each character, there's 5 tiers here. Mm-hmm. And each character
is your build points.
Yeah, is set for one or more tiers. So these are all the different types of characters you can play, and the tiers determined by your GM typically. Yeah. And whatever tier they choose, that's kind of the range of characters you pick. So like tier 1 is like grunts and useless, mooks, whereas tier 5 is like Primaris Marines and super high level tech priests and killer stuff like that.
Yeah, at the same time, you can mix the tiers of play, or you can do stuff like that. You can also take the higher level tier characters and actually tone them down to be a lower level.
Which they showed a little bit in their webcomic they did. The preview webcomic where they're playing, I think, like a tier 2 game, or a tier 3 game, but there was a just like a Acadian guardsman who had been upgraded with certain abilities to match that tier. Yeah.
And I think tier 5 is reserved for like super mean characters too.
Super mega.
This is what happens too, because your max dice pool bonus can go up. Your max difficulty also increases.
Yeah, so they can make tests incredibly difficult, and you can get incredible bonuses. That's for stuff like, if you're gonna for some reason play a bunch of super high level Marines or a group of Inquisitors or
like a Death Watch game or something.
Yeah, you want to play Death Watch, that's probably what you're looking for, tier 5. But for the most part, tier 4 is what most people are gonna stick to. Tier 1, you've got stuff like I said, guardsmen, gangers, cultists, boys. Yeah, I can imagine a great orc boy game.
Oh man.
Tier 2 and 3 are more of your average stuff that you'll see a lot on the tabletop, like Sisters of Battle. You got Rogue Traders, which is really fun.
There's some great models to use for those now.
Yeah, if only we had some box sets or something. Tier 3 is where you get your TAC Marines, your Commissars, your Tech Priests, Warlocks, and Knobs. And Tier 4, like I said, Primaris, Inquisitors. And you can kind of imagine the kind of stuff that would appear here. You can imagine like a Devastator, that kind of stuff. So if that's what you want to play, Tier 4.
For sure.
I want to play as Primarchs, so I need Tier 7.
Tier 7. You should just skip 6.
You just go to tier like infinity. It doesn't matter. So this is your character attributes and skill points again.
Oh, speaking of that, real quick, I want to mention this. You can kind of see how this stuff scales up by like 2 each tier.
It's so pretty
theoretically,
easy.
If you did want to run a tier 10
if you wanted to play like a Horus Heresy game as the Primarchs for some reason, like you could run like a tier 10 game. You just have to keep upgrading these.
Right, you can figure it out.
It's pretty easy to sort of math that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get your tiers again here. They get into psychic powers and all sorts of different abilities and ranks you can use. Of course, you get to choose a species. There's not just humans or space marines.
What?
You get to play as other stuff. It's very helpful. Humans are, of course, going to be what a lot of people play. But you do get Eldar as well.
Yeah, if you want to play Eldar, Orcs, you mentioned.
Orcs are in here as well. Tower, I don't think in the core book. Tower coming, I think, in the first expansion.
That's right, yeah.
I think they're coming in the first expansion. But you have Space Marines, of course, Adeptus, Astartes. So you get different species ability. Now, this is what's really interesting. Is that
different legions?
One of my favorite abilities, Space Marine implants. They don't. They get a bonus, +1 bonus dice on any test if the test is appropriate for one of your 19 Space Marine implants, which conveniently you don't have to remember because I think they're listed in one of these chapters around here somewhere. Yeah, all your implants are listed right here. So if you're ever doing a test and you're thinking, oh, this is something where one of my implants.
Belcher's gland.
Yeah, my Belcher's gland really helped me here. I want a bonus dice. And your GM's like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay, here you go.
The olytic kidney. So did you poison me? Because my kidney's working in overdrive.
Sorry, doesn't matter.
The Susan membrane.
If you get Primaris Marine, of course, you get the extra 3 that Belisarius Cawl invented for his extra 3 implants there. But that's one of the fun things where you actually get to feel like Space Marine. Where it's like, oh, I don't fail that jump. I actually have sinew coils, so I enhance my physical strength when I actually make it.
I love that they included the secondary heart too.
Yeah, so. It's very helpful.
And what I was going to say too is each chapter does actually have some
special rules too. So if, like me, for example, you wanted to play Space Wolves, they get their heightened senses, of course, because of Space Wolves, and they get Savage Within Tradition, so they have actually a +2 difficulty if they're dealing with authority outside their chapter. I can imagine that a good GM making that even harder for something like the Inquisition or something.
Like the Inquisitor shows up and says, hey, I need you to go do this.
And then you blast him with a bolt pistol, and then you start another War for Armageddon.
Bingo.
Exactly.
As one does.
as one typically does. But yeah, we've got Primaris stuff, of course.
White Scars also.
Yeah, White Scars are in there, which is helpful. A lot of people forget about White Scars.
Well, it's because they're on the other page.
Yeah, true.
No, I think...
they're kind of after.
Yeah, I think... if you notice the legions, these are all loyalist legions, obviously. Yeah. And, I'm not saying they couldn't make an expansion for Chaos.
You never know. There's a bestiary at the back of the book.
They totally could make an expansion for Chaos. I mean, they're going to add Tau. Might as well. I'm just saying. Throwing that out there.
So you
back up 1 sec. Yeah. Base tier 7. So, yeah. That's a... What is that? Is that a Primaris or Startus? What is that?
Species abilities. Yeah, I think that's supposed to be a Primaris Intercessor base tier. Yeah. But going through all the tiers is going to take some time with your GM. There's a lot of different tier things.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's skip ahead. You wanted to talk psychic powers because that was your jam, right?
I think it'd be fun.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
What page was that on?
I don't know. Let's find it. I'm gonna look at this art of these Inquisitors and
you're
Commissars.
Skipping around. That was corruption tests and Temptations of the
Well,
Warp.
I also think we should look at weapons too. So let's look at weapons first.
Let's go to weapons.
Let's just keep flipping.
There's classes, not classes.
Play a Guardsman.
Careers, I guess.
I like the little Cadia Lives.
Yep.
Skitari and Tech Priest. Let's just keep flipping through here. You get a bunch of different stuff. There's a lot of rules here. Different skills and abilities and things like that. Character advancement. So advancement's one of those things where we talked about if you play like a tier 1 character in a tier 3 game, and advancement is how you typically do it. So you might become a psyker, you might have some kind of extra ability.
Now, a lot of folks that maybe played Dark Heresy are like, oh, this seems similar to Dark Heresy. I feel like this is a good mix between Dark Heresy, those games, and like D&D 5th edition almost. I feel like this streamlined a lot of stuff, made it easier to understand and kind of learn how to play and get into. It's not as
dense, I think is a good way to say it. Yeah. It's not that those games were overly complicated, but they were very specific.
Yeah.
And if you played one, it was kind of hard to remember how it was different from another. Like if you played Dark Heresy and then you went to play Rogue Trader and then you went to play, Only War or whatever, or Death Watch, it's like the small but important differences between all of those are sometimes hard to remember. Whereas this is sort of a nice generalized, almost
you can
like
play
a toolbox.
any of those previous types of games
in this. It won't be as specifically focused.
Yeah.
But with a good GM and a good group dedicated to making it work, you can make it happen. So we got War Gear here.
War Gear.
I'll highlight the great Sisters of Battle art right there.
Yeah.
But then we've got all this sort of stuff. So you have different keywords and things like that, different traits that weapons have. And this is what we were talking about sort of with weapons and damage. So weapons have their base damage. For example, just your typical bolt gun's going to have 10 base damage plus one extra dice, basically.
Yeah.
And it's through the number of successes, the quality of your successes, that you can add more to that. But for the most part, if you hit with a bolt gun, it's going to hit somebody and explode in them like a bolt round's going to do.
Yeah.
It has different special rules like rapid fire, of course.
Yeah.
It has your value. So a bolt gun's uncommon, whereas an assault bolter is very rare.
Oh yeah.
A flamer is uncommon, but a hand flamer is rare. So it's pretty simple stuff like that. There are, I think, I don't know if the word is specifically unique, but there are some very higher than very rare things. But you have a lot of different weapons, which I really appreciate. They really went out of their way to get as many as they could from the tabletop.
Launcher is very rare. That's an 11.
Yeah, whereas a normal missile launcher is pretty common because any hive ganger can probably get their hands on a missile launcher.
It's a tube that shoots rockets.
Yeah, it's basically a PVC with a bolt round in it. It's not that hard.
Right.
So yeah, you have all your projectile weapons down here. You have your autocannons and shotguns and stubbers and stuff.
Eldar weapons, exotic range weapons.
I like the orc weapons specifically. I think they're very fun. Of course, you got Shuda, Big Shuda, Slugga, Snaz guns, which are unique. That's what it is. That's the keyword, unique. So Snaz guns, of course, are only going to be used by specific types of orcs.
Right. Sluggas are only a 3. They're super
pretty much every boy's going to have a Slugga. And I appreciate the art as well that comes with it. So in case you're like, what does a melted gun look like? Well, that's what it looks like typically.
If you have no idea what they look like, this book's got you covered.
Yeah. So a lot of different weapons. Of course, there are melee weapons also.
Yep.
Which are always a stick bomb. Great piece of art there. So you have...
Those are not clubs. They explode.
They could be clubs, but they will take your hand off with them.
Yep.
So you get your melee weapons, which I like that they split it into chain, force, and power. So if your commissar might have a force sword, whereas your inquisitor is going to have probably a power sword.
I was joking about it, but let me just read this. A crude explosive with a convenient handle. Orcs overtaken by the desire to close with the enemy are known to use these grenades as clubs.
Yeah.
I was joking.
Yeah.
But the orcs...
I mean, it'll take their hand off and then they'll get a new one, so it's fine.
It'll just grow back. They'll stitch it back on. The Mad Dog can fix it.
Power axe, of course. One of my personal favorite power weapons. I know a lot of people like the Thunder Hammer, which is also here, of course. It's a unique, so Thunder Hammer's pretty hard to come by unless you're, a Terminator or a veteran of some kind.
And then there's chain swords, man.
Chainsword, classic chainsword, chain bayonet, chain axe.
Yep.
So you can.
I think there's also like the Eviscerator.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff in here.
Yeah. Exotic. Yeah.
Magic Pain Glove. Power Fist.
Yep.
So yeah, you of course have weapon upgrades, so you can get specific bolt rounds. This is where you can kind of get that Death Watch stuff in.
Yeah,
Kraken bolt rounds, Hellfire bolt rounds, Vengeance bolt rounds, all sorts of stuff.
It should be like very rare unless you're Death Watch.
Unless you're Death Watch, and then it's whenever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I roll.
So we got a lot of great stuff. Prey Sense Sight, which is a lot of fun. Armor, of course, is going to happen as well. Not as much, obviously, because you pretty much have your basic types of armor. You get your powered armor, your orc armor, your basic stuff.
Some of the best stuff here is
body gloves, aka a t-shirt. you get no traits, and you get 2 armor rating. It's basically a neoprene wetsuit.
Right, and the armor's pretty simple. You take your damage, you subtract the armor.
It's essentially a soak kind of value.
Yeah.
It just eliminates a certain number of damage. Yeah. I like that the Rosarius is a thing in armor. Because it protects you.
Yeah.
It's a protective device. It's a force shield, but it's funny that it's an armor. Of course, tons of tools and equipment.
Yep.
All your different stuff like that. Cameline Cloak, which is a fun one I like a lot. Yeah. Of course, you can have cybernetics.
You're gonna want cybernetics when you lose arms and stuff.
Yeah, it's good that there's rules for them. And they've specifically broken down like Eldar cybernetics and orc cybernetics and stuff like that.
So you can tell this game's got they've thought a lot about a lot of stuff.
And again, a lot of it is Imperium.
Cultists, just saying.
Yeah, just hanging. Goliath, Rock Rider. But a lot of this obviously is Imperium because a lot of people are going to play Imperium-based games. But for the orc, for the Eldar, those are in here as well. And I can very easily see these charts in the future. With Tau weaponry, with Gene Stealer Cult mining weaponry, with all sorts of stuff.
Here's psychic powers. Also, those are in the game, obviously. Mm-hmm. There are some bad things that happen.
Dangers of the Warp are still a thing. It is still very deadly to be a psyker in certain instances. But there's
you get some powerful, cool stuff, but if it backfires...
And there's a lot more, I guess, perils of the Warp is what we can call them, because there's this whole chart full of them. Demonic Possession, one of my personal favorites.
Speaking of,
you
get turned into a demon.
So these are going to be all your selected powers. You have universals, you have biomancy, divination, very much like the tabletop game where your psychic disciplines are split among these different types of factions. But yeah.
Yep, and then it goes over
how the effects happen, all sorts of basic stuff. Deny the witch tests are of course a thing. Yep. So you can defend against psychers if you are one. And then we get into
I think there's certain abilities if you have high enough will you can actually try to.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff just like in just like in the tabletop.
And it's just these are basically the spells.
Boil
40K.
Blood. That's a fun one.
This is basically like a spell section.
Yeah, these are essentially wizard spells, sorcerer spells, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Eldari, psychic powers, of course, are different.
Yeah, just like the tabletop.
And then there is a corruption mechanic for being corrupted by chaos, of course. So that's going to be something if you're playing, if your campaign has chaos as enemies, you're fighting chaos marines or cultists, you're going to worry about corruption levels, and you're going to want to make sure you have somebody to keep an eye on you.
Phobias, addictions, all that stuff. Yep. If you start messing around with the dark stuff in the Imperium,
then that'll be you. Right there.
Messed up. Yeah.
That's what you'll look like. So, all sorts of different stuff. The role of the Game Master, a lot of breaking down of what a Game Master is supposed to do, how a campaign works. And then in the back here, almost the last section here, we get our Bestiary, which is some of my personal favorite stuff. Let's see. Here we go. So here's how they break it down, basically. They're threats, essentially. Yeah. They have different types of threats. So there's different sizes, different examples. So a tiny threat is like a servo skull. Gargantuan is a greater demon, which I hope to never.
Or a hive tyrant.
Hive tyrant.
Yeah.
Or a land raider. Or a baneblade. I feel like a baneblade should be maybe like a step up. Baneblades are big.
Lord of War, man.
Yeah, that should be the last one. Lord of War. Right. Magnus, right there.
To hit modifier plus 4.
Yeah. Stealth modifier as much as he wants. Whatever.
Right.
Okay. But there's different types of creatures and threats. They have. Different Imperial threats. So if you want to try and make a Chaos game,
right?
Guardsmen.
Well, there's just Trader Guardsmen too. You're probably
abhumans, that kind of stuff.
Whoa!
Veteran troops, servitors.
Creepy.
All sorts of cool stuff. That is a great piece of servitor art.
It's an old school one too. Right?
Mutants.
Looks awesome.
Yeah. We got the threats continuing. Chaos cultists, space marines, obviously.
Chaos space marine.
Chaos spawn mutation. You do get demon stats in here.
Oh
Demonette,
By the way, if you run into a demon and you are not a space marine, it is going to be bad. Take it from me. It happened to us in the game.
Yeah.
we would look crazy.
And that's one thing that's fun about tiers. They read off an example where it's like if you're a tier 1 game, like a Gene Stealer is like the big boss. It's like you don't want to mess with it. Whereas if you're a tier 4 game, a Gene Stealer is like, oh, bolt round done. Who's next?
Yeah,
like
you better have.
That's when you're worrying about Hive Tyrants. So it's really great depending on how you want to play as tiers. Where it's like your tier 3, like a Lictor might be okay. That's gonna be pretty tough.
Heck yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is such a good system and such a good book.
Very clean. Yeah. A lot of different tables and rules and things like that, but they're all for a very specific focus, a very specific thing. And there's a lot of stuff you can ignore if you're not playing Eldari or Orcs.
Right. But it's all you need to get started for Wrath and Glory, the core rule book. Highly recommend this one.
Absolutely.
We're both pretty pumped about this one. I'm glad it's finally out. So let's take a real quick recap. Well, that was Wrath and Glory again. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yep, it's nice. Stuff. It's good for you know an updated 40k RPG. It's good for all sorts of experience levels too.
Oh yeah, and I do like the GM screen with the extra charts and stuff. Just quick reference.
Very useful for your GM because there's a lot of different types of dice rolls and resources you got to remember too. So
it helps keep track of everything. So I'm pretty pumped. Again, we got that preview with Ross way back a couple months.
Back in playtest.
Yeah, pretty much. And now it's out, available. Let's talk numbers real quick. Yeah. Price points on these.
So the main book here is going to run you about $59.99. Yep. And the GM screen kit is going to run you about $24.99. Cool. Might be a little different depending on your store or whatever online retailer you choose, but should be around there.
Yep. And again, it is an RPG, so playtime's going to vary by session and the number of players. Personally, I recommend 1 to 5, 1 being a DM, and then 4 other players.
Typical 4 players is going to get you a good squad.
You can have more if you want,
play.
But that's up to you. Personal preference. Yeah. So go check these out. These are both in stores right now. I'm Adam here from BoLS.
I'm Michael with Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy.
And this has been another Tabletop Spotlight. Thanks again for watching. Dead. Tabletop Spotlight, brought to you by Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy. Click to subscribe. Check out more videos. And thanks for watching.